Okay, Hazy and T in the building. If you like what I'm doing, you hit the subscribe button right there.
What's going on? I'm Scott Rintoul. Coming up on I Only Touch Greatness podcast. Me.
Hayes Entertainment exclusive.
Ryan Hayes. Ron never stop. I Only Touch Greatness podcast.
What's up, man?
This
Hey
is
Scott, how you doing?
I
Good, how are
Only
you?
Touch Greatness
Thanks for taking the
podcast
time to
with
stop by.
Ryan Hayes.
Yeah, man. I know it's been a while getting it coordinated, but we finally got her done, right?
Yeah, that's all that matters. I'm Ryan, by the way, so nice to meet
Awesome.
you.
Nice to meet you, man. And met you over Instagram, but now we've met over Zoom.
Hey, technically, later on in my questions, we have met before. I'll bring that up.
Okay.
All
right.
So you grew up in Kamloops?
Yeah, for the most part. I grew up in northern Alberta before that. Actually born in the Northwest Territories, but moved to Kamloops when I was in grade 3, I guess. And then, I was there until the end of high school before moving to Vancouver.
Was you always into sports as a youngster? And what sports?
Yeah, I was into sports. I was like probably most kids that grew up around my time. Like I played everything. Wasn't good at everything, but played everything. Thought I was good at everything. Played almost the only sport actually I didn't play that much organized was ice hockey. Just I grew up at the time with a single mom. We couldn't afford it, and it was pretty tough being able to get around. She worked as a nurse and shift work, so that was the one sport I couldn't play beyond a couple of years when I was really young. So a lot of school sports, community sports as well. But yeah, a little bit of everything growing up.
What made you choose sports broadcasting?
Oh man, that's how long you got. That's a long story.
Hey, I'm ready for as long as you need.
Yeah, I'm one of those guys who found it late. If you look at what I did growing up, it's probably not that surprising I ended up here. But I went to school for something entirely different. I did pretty well in school, actually. And so, like a lot of kids who grew up and had good marks at that time, your parents and your family's like, go to school, be a doctor, that sort of thing. So I took off to UBC, was in sciences, graduated in biochemistry, and then kind of decided that wasn't the path I wanted to take, didn't want to do that. Went back for a couple of years. And in that time, I was a walk-on at UBC. I walked on for a couple of years playing football. And so I wanted to go back for a couple of years, play a couple more years of football, and just did courses that I liked. And I really didn't know what I was going to do. And I took like acting, and I took accounting, I took Spanish. I took all these courses that I couldn't take when I was in sciences. And then one of my last years playing football, one of our guest coaches that came out actually was Farhan Lalji. And he was kind of getting his coaching career going, and he came out as a guest coach. And so he was coaching my position, which was receivers. And I talked to him. I said, man, how did you get into doing what you're doing? And he said, look, I get asked that a lot. If you're actually serious about it, you should look into BCIT because they've got a really good program. And he said, I can help you get a look at what a TV studio looks like. You can come down and volunteer, no money or anything at TSN, but you should really look into BCIT. So I did, ended up going into that program, really liked it, and then here I am.
Yeah, we had Farhan on Thursday, so that's good. And BCIT, I know how good their radio broadcasting course is too.
Yeah, it's really good. And I ended up doing broadcast journalism, and you can do 2 or 3 different things there. You know, there's a TV side, there's a radio side, and there's broadcast journalism, which does a little bit of everything. So I actually didn't think I'd be doing radio whatsoever. In fact, they have a talk show there. I believe it's called For the Record. And in broadcast journalism, you have to do a week of that in your second year. And I didn't have it on my schedule early. And I remember somebody wanted to switch with me. And I was more into the TV thing, and I thought that's where my career lied. You know, I like watching guys like Don Taylor and Barry McDonald and Randorf and Shorthouse growing up. And I was like, man, that's what I want to do. I want to be on Sports Page. I want to be on the desk on one of these big sports shows. And so I can remember somebody wanted to switch with me, wanted me to do the radio show for a week, do a talk show like what I'm doing now. And I said to the teacher, they said, well, can I do mostly sports? And they said, no, you can do one sports show and the rest have to be news oriented. And I said to the guy, no, I'm not doing it, man. I'm not switching with you. When my number comes up, I'll do it then. But I'm not doing a talk show like that. So I never thought I'd be doing this. I thought I'd go into TV, which is where I started my career. And then the next thing you know, life twists and turns one way the next, and here I am.
Yeah, that's awesome. And then I was going to say, you played football at UBC. What position you answered as a wide receiver?
Yeah, so in high school I was a quarterback, but I'm 5'7". So that quickly became a non-starter for playing quarterback at the next level, and I wasn't recruited by anybody. I thought I was a lot better than I was, like a lot of kids coming out of high school, and you never think the dream's going to die. So I had no offers, nothing like that, but I was going to school anyway. And a couple years in, I finally made it as a walk-on and didn't play very much my first couple years. By the end of my career there, I was playing a lot. I was a starter, and I was a fairly main component of the offense, but it took a long road to get there.
Yeah, and you're a pretty big local superstar around here, as you would call it. You've hosted a lot of awesome things. You've worked with TSN 1040, and I know that you've also done BC Lions play-by-play, and then, of course, the sports page with Don Taylor. I'm in talks with getting Don on here one of these nights, too. What's it like working with Don, and what did he teach you when you were younger?
Oh, he taught me so much, and actually all those guys did. When I got to sports page, Don had actually left already. So Barry McDonald was the main guy there at the time, and he was awesome. He was such a mentor for me. We would end up doing a radio show together at 1040 years later, but he's the guy who hired me and really mentored me early. But I learned a lot from him. The cameraman who's there forever and still works at Global, Trevor Henderson, that guy, you should get him on at some point. He's got stories for days, and he's seen all the different areas. He's fantastic. So they taught me a lot about storytelling. Don as well. So I went to Sportsnet Pacific after I was at Sports Page because they had a full-time position for me. It was a reporting position. I didn't have that at Sports Page at the time. So there I worked with Don Taylor and Dan Murphy and Craig McEwen. And those guys, they really took me under their wing and told me to take chances with my storytelling. And sometimes it bombed. Like sometimes I put stories together that I thought were going to turn out great, and they'd go on the air and I watch them. We were like, that didn't really work. But those guys told me to take chances, and they always had my back. And if anybody called about it from out east, they would always say, no, we encourage him to do it, and we think it's good. And, the work's great, and he's putting in all the time. So those guys told me to take chances. They highlighted my strengths, but they also helped me improve my weaknesses as well at the time. I learned a ton from those guys.
You ever seen the guy that goes to Canuck games that dresses like Don Cherry?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's me.
That's you? You're the guy who does it?
Yeah.
All right. Okay, Now I know who you are.
Yeah, so it makes a little bit of sense. That's still not where I've met you. But, yeah, you were saying McEwen and of course, Sportsnet Murph and Shorthouse and them. And I ran into them dressed as Don Cherry at the UBC. The Canucks held an open practice out at UBC this year.
Nice.
Yeah, I ran into him down there, so they might remember the Don Cherry guy. I got a picture with them.
Oh, I'm sure they would, man. That's pretty tough to forget.
Yeah, that just started as a Halloween costume, and it was Canucks played Chicago on Halloween night, and I made it all over TV 2 years ago.
Beautiful.
And I just ran with the idea from there, and yeah, it's pretty good. You take a lot of pictures of the kids. I swear every time I dress up, though, I catch a cold like 3 days later because you're hugging everybody, you're shaking hands with everybody, and yeah, so how did you get into doing the Lions, and how long did you do them?
So when I got hired at 1040 originally, just to backtrack a little, I was at Sportsnet Pacific, and then the big lockout came in hockey, the one we all remember from 04-05. And Sportsnet at that time, about halfway through the lockout, they went, we're making some cuts. And they cut a guy in every market, or a reporter in every single market, some women, some men. And we didn't think anybody was going to get cut in Vancouver because our ratings were really strong. We had a great show. And they ended up axing me at that time. I was low man on the totem pole, and it made sense from that standpoint. So I was out of work at the time. I was working at my buddy's place, the Furniture Warehouse, DJing for him on the side. And there was an opening all of a sudden at 1040. And it was because Rick Dollywall had gone over to CKNW, taking the sports director's job over there. And so Rick had been doing the pre and post game for the Lions. And it was right before the Lions season, and they weren't quite sure what they were going to do. And Don and Barry were both there at the time, and they both went to bat for me immediately. They just said, look, the guy to bring in, he happens to be on the market. Like, this guy knows his football, played university football. We had him do a lot of our football coverage. You got to get him in here. So I went in, and thought I'd be there for maybe the season, doing Lions pre and post, doing a few updates. And the next thing you know, I'm working there full time, and they've got me on the Lions broadcast, and that turns into doing the pre and post, but also doing sidelines. So I did it for a lot of years. Rick Ball was doing the play-by-play, Julio Caravetta on the color. And then when Rick missed a couple of games here or there, they just thought it was natural to bring me up from the sidelines and call the games. And that turned into Rick eventually leaving to call Flames hockey in Calgary. And because I had some experience, and because I was already in the fraternity at 1040, they just moved me up to the booth right there.
Oh, yeah. And I'm a Lions season ticket holder, and still am, and always will be. So I've always listened to you back in the day.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
Okay. Yeah. This stat I didn't even know. This one when I was Googling your name and running through, you were in the Boston Marathon bombing.
Yeah. Fortunately not in the bombing part, but yeah, I was there. So I've done Boston 3 times, and that was the second time I went back. I did it like 15 years ago, and then met my wife after that, and we were married at the time, and I was kind of looking for something to do, just motivation-wise for fitness. And I said, "You want to go to Boston next year?" And she said, "Sure." I said, "Okay, I'm going to run Vancouver, and then I'll qualify for Boston, and we'll go there." And so we went, and it turns out to be the year that the marathon gets bombed. Yeah. So it was, in retrospect, it was kind of scary because even though we had cleared the finish line, like my wife was pregnant with our first daughter at that time. So she was hanging out right in the area where everything happened before it all went down. And you get that thought that it could have been you. It could have been anyone. We went back the next year as well. It was fantastic. What an incredible event. One of the best events I've ever been a part of. But yeah, that year of the bombing was pretty surreal, man.
How did you find out what had happened?
Well, I finished the race, and I had a pretty decent day, and went back to my hotel room, and I told the guys, I was working at 1040 at the time, and I told the guys that I would do an on-air interview with them. So they called me in my hotel room. We joked about it a little because that year there's another guy who's actually local BC guy now, Rob Watson. Rob Watson was winning the Boston Marathon for a bunch of it. And so this Canadian's winning the Boston Marathon. He didn't end up winning the race, but he was leading it for quite some time. And so the guys were joking with me, "Oh, were you that Canadian out in front?" And we were just having some fun with it. And so I hang up the phone, and I go get in the shower, and I come out of the shower, and my wife's like, "Your phone's going nuts." That's kind of crazy. And all of a sudden there were all these text messages, and they were all saying, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm fine. Why?" And one of them was from a guy at work. And I said, "I just was on the air with you guys. What are you asking if I'm okay for?" And they said, "Turn on your TV." And we were only about 8 blocks away from the finish line, but we hadn't heard it. We were in our hotel room, and for whatever reason, we hadn't heard the explosion. And you turn it on, and all of a sudden it's chaos, and the phone starts ringing. You're taking interview requests, and you've got family that you're trying to calm down, that you're not involved. And it was a pretty wild time, but I actually found out because people texted me as opposed to me letting people know that I was there.
Yeah, did they tell you to stay in the hotel?
Yeah, so didn't really have a choice at the time. As I said, like, I can't even think. I'd have to go back and look at my notes. I wrote it down how many interviews I did that day, but obviously I was doing all kinds of affiliate radio. I was getting national radio calls. I'd done interviews with guys in Seattle in the past, so they had a contact for me, found out I was there. They're calling me. So I was just on the air. I was working for 3-4 hours right after that, and we weren't sure if we were going to be allowed to leave our hotel or not. By the time I was done, we were allowed to leave. We were advised to stay, but there wasn't really anywhere to eat, and I was starving at that time. And so the restaurants in the hotel were all packed because a lot of people didn't want to go out. So we went out on the street and just walked to a nearby restaurant, and everything was fine by that point in time. But yeah, that's a day I will never forget. And it's kind of weird, the movie comes on every once in a while, and the first time I saw the movie with Mark Wahlberg, we thought, my wife and I, let's watch this. And I couldn't believe how affected we were. I guess it just welled up a lot of emotions that you didn't think were necessarily there. And you see the finish line, and obviously it's recreated, but it's amazing how well done it was and how much emotion it stirs in you.
And you're an actor too, right? Because I've seen that online.
Yeah, I did a little bit of that. I wish I could do more of it. I don't have as much time now that I've got a couple of kids, but I did that for a few years. I dabbled in it. It's something that always interested me, and I love doing it. I just don't find I have enough time to do it. But, man, I love it.
What was your biggest one?
I don't know if we could say I had a biggest one.
You had a couple. You had a couple roles, and like I looked up the shows. I didn't write them down. All I said was ask you about your shows, but
yeah. So I did a couple episodes. Have you ever heard of the show Psych?
I think so. That might have been one of them.
Okay, so that was one that I was in, and that was playing a reporter. So that was a real leap for me artistically to play a reporter. So I was in a couple episodes of that, and then there was a show that didn't last long called Alcatraz, and it was shot in Vancouver, and I was in an episode of that. And I was the character John Kowalski. So I hang on to that one, and I got to do. I'll tell you what was cool about that. It was they did one of those scenes, and they'd recreated Alcatraz. They did a great job of that with the set, but that was one of those scenes because Alcatraz, obviously San Francisco, weather gets pretty rainy. I got to work under those rain machines. Man, those things, you think the weather's bad right now. Those things can pound the water out. It's awesome.
Yeah, actually, it's pouring down outside, I believe, right now.
It is.
Where do you stay?
Right now?
Yeah, like where do you live? Like in
Vancouver? I'm in North Vancouver, so yeah, we get our fair share of rain.
Oh, yeah, and I'm in Coquitlam at the top of the hill, so.
Nice.
We also get a lot of rain up here, right across from the John B.
Oh, beautiful. Yeah, I used to live out that way, man.
Yeah, that's my unofficial sponsor, the John B. Pub. I'll pump that right there.
Beautiful, I like it.
Maybe I'll get a free drink or something. Yeah.
Maybe two.
Yeah, hopefully. Okay, here's where I met you. 2010 Olympics. I believe you were hosting an event at the Commodore. Donovan Bailey was there. And you invited two people up on stage to play NHL 10, it must have been at the time, to do a shootout. One of them was my best buddy, and then he ended up winning the Luongo jersey because he scored. And
that's awesome.
And he gave me the Luongo jersey, so I still have that from that day. And then I was in the front row giving you shit, just chirping.
Oh, yeah. Well, you probably weren't alone. There's probably a bunch of people doing the same thing, man.
Yeah. Did you get that? I was asking Farhan the other day, like, I hear people at the Lions games always like chanting his name and yelling at him. Do you hear that stuff and like, holy shit, that's awesome, or holy shit, no?
Yes, people used to do it when I was on the sidelines. That's usually when it happens. Guys give it to you a little bit from the crowd, and sometimes they're doing it affectionately, and sometimes they're just trying to give you a hard time. I found, honestly, every time that I heard it, which was most of the time because I'd have one earpiece in because I wanted to hear what was going on in the field, so you'd hear a little bit. Honestly, I always found that if you just turned around and acknowledged the people and kind of gave them a wave, or even if they said you suck, you went, kind of whatever, and had some fun with it, they just kind of laugh. They just want to get your attention.
Yeah, that's pretty much. And a couple drinks in, everybody wants just to get you going.
Yeah, and we're just jealous down on the sideline that we can't have a couple of drinks at that time, man.
Yeah, that's for sure. Okay, let's get into some new Canucks stuff here. Sure. Brock Boeser for Dumba talks were on the board last week. They've kind of died down this week. What do you think of that trade?
I think it's too much for the Canucks to give up, quite frankly. I think Dumba fits nicely on their blue line. I think they like him because he plays with a lot of jam, if you were to ask the organization. But to give up Brock Boeser in that deal, I don't see that as the right fit. I don't think they want to move on from Boeser. I don't consider him an untouchable on this roster. I think there's very few untouchables on most rosters around the NHL. So could you trade Brock Boeser? Yeah. Are they looking to trade him? No. And I think people get a little confused on this. People have some backlash because they hear about one of their favorite players, and I can see the Boeser jersey in behind you there. He's obviously a guy that you like as well. And who doesn't like Brock Boeser, man? He's a great kid. He's been a dynamic scorer for them at times. Yeah, he struggled with injury from time to time, but he's been a great spokesman for the team. All these sorts of things. Like, everybody loves Brock Boeser, but the reason his name comes up is because if you're interested in something that's good from somebody else, chances are they're interested in something good from you. So you can't just take a bunch of spare parts and say, okay, send Matt Dumba this way. Hey, let us offload some back money and send Matt Dumba this way. There's going to be an ask on their part as well. And with Boeser being from Minnesota, if you were in charge of the Minnesota Wild, what would you ask for? You'd probably ask for him. After you got through the names Pedersen and Horvat and Jim Benning stopped laughing at you, you'd probably get on to Boeser, right?
Yeah, I'd even put Quinn on there before too, Boeser. But
sure. But again, these are things that aren't going to be part of it. But if you're the Minnesota Wild, are you going to ask for a kid who's born and raised in Minnesota and has a great following there, and for a team that needs offense, sure you are.
Right.
And Jim Benning's likely going to say, yeah, we're not going to make that deal. But of course you're going to ask. So that's why it comes up. I think people get a little confused on that. They think some people are trying to ship the guy out of town, which isn't the case.
Yeah, and not every day is it like my fantasy football team where I'm trying to trade. I'm trying to trade 4 bums for one guy just to clear off some bench space.
Yeah, exactly. You're just hoping to catch your buddy when he's drunk, and
you accidentally hits okay, right?
Exactly. I don't think NHL deals work quite like that, though. There's some in the past that you might argue they did.
Yeah, there used to be a guy. There was Kareem Hunt and then Kaheem Hunt or something. They had both the same names. Both played in Kansas City. Both started with a K. And I switched that in one time. I traded the guy the wrong Hunt. Yeah.
Pretty funny. I think it was Kadeem Hunt.
Kadeem Hunt, yeah. So I made that trade. I traded him that guy and ended up taking Zeke Elliott back in return. And then, yeah, the commissioner reversed it after he saw how dirtbag-ish move that was for me. But
hey, you got to try, right?
yeah, you caught him sleeping. Okay, next one. What do you think we do with Markstrom?
I think they sign him. I think eventually they get this deal done, but I don't think it's going to be easy, and I do think it's going to take the next couple of weeks to get there. I think he wants to stay. I mean, is it possible he leaves? Yeah. If they can't get close enough to what he wants, I can see him going because there's going to be money available and there's going to be teams interested. If Leonard signs in Vegas, and most people think that's what's going down, Jacob Markstrom's clearly the best free agent goaltender available. You can make a case for whatever Hudobin's going right now, but nobody's ever seen Hudobin play 50-plus games in a season. He's never been the guy that you've leaned on as your number one, and I don't think that's going to change in his mid-30s. Nothing against him. He's had a fantastic run, and he's 3 wins away from winning the Stanley Cup. So congratulations to him. I hope he gets paid as a result. But that's the guy on everybody's list if he gets to free agency. It's Jacob Markstrom. So for him, it comes down to one thing. How much less? How much less is he willing to take to stay in Vancouver? Because if he goes to the open market, he'll make more. And he might get more term. But what's it worth to him personally? And that's a question I can't answer for him because it's different for everybody.
Yeah, and that's like I heard the talk today that it might be Detroit that's in on that.
Sure, could be Detroit, it could be Calgary, it could be Toronto, it could be Colorado saying, "Hey, we can't do something long term, but we'll pay you a bunch of money for 1 year because we got cap space and we got a team that's ready to roll." Like, there's so many scenarios you could play out because there are so many teams that want to change their goaltenders this year.
I have a better idea for how Colorado gets a goalie.
All right.
We trade him Thatcher Demko and Jake Virtanen for Bowen Byram.
Yeah, I think Vancouver would do that.
Yeah, I think they might. Yeah,
as long as they get Markstrom signed, they would do that.
Yeah, would Colorado be in on that? That's why you're throwing in Virtanen as a sweetener.
I don't know if Virtanen's enough to get that deal done. Right. I really don't. Now, maybe they want the young goaltender that bad, and maybe a guy that they would have under their team umbrella. But goaltenders generally don't fetch that on the open market. Bowen Byram's got all the makings of a top pairing defenseman in this league. And if they can get him back to Vancouver, yes, try. Absolutely. I just don't think Colorado pulls the trigger on that.
Yeah, I'm trying to this is something that I want to happen as that Bowen's a good friend of the show. So I'm trying to get this idea to get all you sports guys to start talking about this, to get this going as a rumor. And so maybe you bring this up tomorrow on the morning show.
Hey, we've had a couple people text in. We've had people say that, saying who says no, and always the answer comes back, Colorado probably says no, but I don't blame them for trying.
They're looking for a center, aren't they? They could so instead of you might not be Virtanen, you have to give up Gaudette.
Yeah, if they want to go third line that way, I mean, they seem pretty decent up front. Now that they've got Kadri in there, they're not as desperate to get help behind McKinnon, and obviously Gaudette wouldn't slot in the top 6 anyway.
Yeah.
But they seem pretty set with what they've got. They're going to have to pay a couple of guys in a couple of years from now. But next year, it can be an all-in year where they can push some chips in. They can do short-term deals if they want. I mean, honestly, if you're Taylor Hall and you don't get the term you want on the open market, could you sign with Colorado for 1 year and load up and say, let's go win something here and I'll get paid next year? Yeah, you could do that. This is going to be a wild year of free agency, man. These next couple of weeks could be nuts. And then once the gates open on free agency, depending how many deals have been done or haven't been done, this could be something we've never seen before.
Yeah, you think Bowen Byram would make that team next year? They're still not. I'm thinking he's a year away. Maybe they send him back to Vancouver Giants. Be a 20-year-old.
I think they probably want him there next year. I
Yeah.
could be wrong, but they
I
brought
hope
him
they
up
do.
for the return to play. Now I know he didn't get in on it, but they made him a part of that camp, and they made him part of that camp for a reason.
Yep.
And if they are going to pay a couple of guys, and I don't have Joe Sakic's game plan. I wish I did. That'd make for a pretty easy show if I just rolled out what Sakic was going to do one day. But if they're going to pay a couple of guys and say, here's all in, they're going to need some cheap labor as well. And that's what entry-level contracts are, and that's what Bowen Byram would be on.
I know. I'd love to see him in Vancouver. He's actually a nice guy. Nice guy.
He sure is. He's been great for that organization, man. He's represented them so well, and I wish him all the best. Had him on the show a few times. Had the pleasure, like yourself, of meeting him, and wish him all the best moving forward.
Yeah, we meet him at the games and stuff, and because he was in the bubble, he pushed me back a couple weeks, but we're trying to line him up too in the next week or so.
Beautiful.
Okay, what team do you think should take Eriksson? I don't think he's getting bought out.
Oh, he's not getting bought out. That contract's too hard to buy out. It doesn't help them very much to buy that contract out. So what team's taking Eriksson? Whichever team wants him, quite frankly. And the question is going to be, is there enough of a sweetener Vancouver can put in to make that work? Now,
Bertanen.
Listen, we've been talking about this for a couple of years, and people in Vancouver always want to make this case. And it's fair from a financial standpoint. They don't owe much money, an acquiring team. So Louis Eriksson's going to count for $6 million against the cap the next 2 years, and he's only going to be paid $5 million actual money. So that's $12 million cap hit for $5 million actual money. So value-wise, in terms of actual cash out the door, it's there if you just want to get to the floor and you say, well, we could use a veteran guy to be on our bottom six and kill penalties, but there's other bad money out there too. And how much is Jim Benning going to have to pay to move that contract? Or the other alternative that people have talked about for a long time, if they say, look, we're not going to have you on the roster next year, there's nowhere really to play other than Utica, is that something you really want to do? Or is it better now that you've realized $31 million out of this $36 million contract to go back to Sweden? And I have no idea what Louis Eriksson feels about that. $5 million is a lot of money to anybody.
Yeah.
But if you've made 31 or 36, maybe that's plausible at this point in time.
Anything to get him off the team.
Hey, I got to give the guy this because, look, he's not worth what they paid him, nothing like that. When he was asked to go in and play a role, he was better this year than I thought he'd be. I'll give him that. Yeah.
I know he stands out as like maybe a Canucks regret. Maybe him and Messier being the only two that we big regrets. I mean, the Luongo contract still haunts you, but Luongo dominated while he was here.
Yeah, nobody regrets Luongo. People at the time wondered about the contract. I think their anger is more directed at the league for retroactively punishing them, and I'm on that train too. I think it's ridiculous that you can sign a guy under one set of rules and then they can bring in another set of rules and say we're retroactively punishing that contract. Like, can you imagine if, like, next year Revenue Canada changes the tax laws and then says, we went back and looked at your 2015 tax filings and you owe us this much because we changed the tax laws.
Yeah.
No, you can't do that. But the NHL did, and I know their justification is that they warned the Canucks not to sign the contract. They signed the contract under the rules of engagement. They shouldn't have been retroactively punished for it.
That's for sure. Okay. Did you ever hear the thing about the owners voting? I got 4 more questions, 4 or 5 more questions.
Yeah, sure.
Did you ever hear the thing about the owners did a vote that if there's no players in the stands, they don't want to have a season? Some guy at the bar was talking about this in the smoke pit last couple nights ago. And
I don't know if it's been a vote, but I know that is the NHL's plan right now, is that they want a season that at some point includes fans. Now, they're pretty realistic. They understand that whether they start in December, which seems unlikely now, or more likely in January, there's a very good possibility that there are going to be places like Vancouver, in all likelihood, where the local authorities don't allow people to be there. There's going to be other places, because we're seeing it in the NFL right now. We're seeing it in college football in some places, where fans are going to be allowed. And in those jurisdictions, the NHL will take the money just like any other business would take the money. So they're hoping, I think their realistic plan is, look, if we can start the season where we have fans in the stands in some places, hopefully by the time we're wrapping things up, most places have fans. Hopefully some places are close to capacity. Cross your fingers, hope there's a vaccine by that point in time, and that everything we're going through here in 2020 isn't the same in 2021. But I can't see them going through a season where there's no fans entirely. I just don't think the revenue model will work for them.
Yeah, and that's kind of like, you look at the Lions, they're a fan-driven league where you got it. This year, I didn't want them to come back. Like, I just take the whole year off, come back with a better product. They need to get a video game, I think, that get into the heads of the kids. The kids don't really give a shit about the BC Lions or the CFL. They'd rather watch the NFL because they can play the game. So why not have a CFL game?
So interestingly enough, Doug Flutie's video game that came out now includes CFL mode on Dynasty. So you can actually play some CFL football on a new video game that came out. They struck an agreement last week, and
Really?
we actually talked about it on my show.
Oh.
And who knows? That's just one pathway, but it does expose younger people to the game in a different way. And yeah, you're right. When the CFL gets back up and running, that's part of the push. Is they're going to have to strengthen their base. They're going to have to call the people who, like yourself, who've been season ticket holders for years and say, we need you to come back. We need your support right now. But yes, they've missed a couple of generations, and they need to do a way better job of, quite frankly, getting families out to the game, because that's where it starts for a lot of people. And it's one thing to hope that millennials are going to come. I do think they need to talk to millennials and say, hey, what would get you here? And maybe there isn't anything in some markets. But if there is, try those ideas. Trying to get families to the game, you probably went when you were a kid. And you probably still go because at that time, whether you went with your family or you went with friends, whatever it was, you became affiliated with the league, and all of a sudden that was something that was just kind of in your blood. If you go as a kid, if you play a sport as a kid, you're so much more likely to become a fan for life.
And Grandma buys my season tickets every year, so that's why it's been a ritual that I keep going.
I like it.
So yeah, I'm definitely there, and I like to go for the beers, of course, same as the Canuck games. But they're a little expensive. But hey, that's part of the whole experience.
It is.
Do you have a football team?
Yeah. In the CFL or the NFL?
NFL. Let's go NFL.
I'm a Niners guy.
Okay.
I'm a San Francisco 49ers fan. Joe Montana. That's why. When I first started watching football, I was obviously, like most kids, attracted to teams that won, and I was attracted to quarterbacks because that was the position that I kind of felt like I wanted to play. And Joe Montana and the 49ers passed the football a lot. That in the 80s, a lot of teams ran the football all the time. Not the Niners. They threw it around. They ran that West Coast offense. Bill Walsh was so great, and Joe Montana was the guy at the helm. And he wore the same number as my favorite CFL quarterback, who was Matt Dunnigan. They both wore number 16, and they played the position entirely differently. But Joe Montana was the first quarterback in the National Football League that I kind of fell in love with as a kid. And from there, I just became a 49ers fan for life. Yeah,
I'm born in '83, so I grew up a 49ers fan, and I was a 49ers fan. Then when I started getting money and a job and stuff, I started going to all these Seahawks games. But it started off as just the 49ers I wanted to see. But now it's like Seahawks was a multiple thing. Now my friends are season ticket holders, and so now I'm a Seahawks fan. And it sucks that they're in the same division, but yeah, so it's interesting you bring that up, because when I was growing up in Kamloops, we got all of the Seattle stations as our like ABC, NBC affiliates, that CBS, that sort of thing. So the games that were generally on were Seahawks games. And I was a Niners fan. They were in primetime games a decent amount. They played Monday Night Football, but they weren't always on the TV every single week. The Seahawks were. And the Seahawks back in those days, as you just mentioned, they were in the AFC. So I kind of liked the Seahawks. I cheered for the Seahawks to win in the AFC, and I thought, well, it'd be pretty cool if the Seahawks and the 49ers met in the Super Bowl. And then they switched divisions. And so I can't say that I've ever been a Seahawks hater, because I'm not. And you can't manufacture that emotion. And they've been a fun team to watch this past decade, man. Like, give me a choice. They're playing head-to-head. It's not close. I'm going to be a Niners guy first and foremost. But I like watching the Seahawks play. I like watching good football, and they played a lot of good football. Yeah, they are. They look really good. I took them to win the Super Bowl many months ago, and hopefully it happens. Well, I wrote this question out last week when I thought I was going to be interviewing you yesterday. But now that we got a 2-1 series lead, I was going to ask you who you thought was going to win the Stanley Cup, but it looks like it might be over.
Well, maybe. It's only 2-1, and Dallas hasn't quit this entire time. They got rolled a little bit tonight, man. Stamkos gave Tampa such a boost. He played less than 3 minutes, man. But what an epic story to spend 2 months in the bubble waiting for the opportunity to play, and you come out and you score in your first game back, and it didn't end up being the winning goal, which would have been even more poetic for their captain. He might not play again. Like, that might be it. But boy, did he give him a boost for one game. I think Dallas is still going to have something to say about this. People have counted them out every single round.
Yeah, they have.
I had so many questions about Dallas coming in. I didn't think they could score enough goals. They were one of the lowest scoring teams in hockey this year. In the Western Conference, I believe they were third or fourth lowest scoring. They were down there with teams like LA and Anaheim. But they had great defense. And then all of a sudden, they played that series against Calgary, and they started to explode. And they got a lot of confidence. And so they're a different group right now than the one before. I'm with you. I think Tampa Bay's the deeper team. I think Tampa Bay's the better team. But Dallas just doesn't go away. So there's zero chance I'm counting them out yet.
You think Stamkos might be the first captain of Seattle?
It's possible. I have no idea. I'll say this. The only reason I would say you've got something there is, yeah, he's a big cap hit and he draws some fans. And if he's got a Stanley Cup, maybe he feels like his work in Tampa is finished. The other thing is this. The CEO down there, the guy who's in charge of everything after the owners, is Todd Lewicki. Now, Todd Lewicki used to work way back in the day for the Canucks and the Grizzlies, went on to the PGA Tour, Minnesota Wild. He was with the Seahawks. Then he was with the Lightning.
Yep.
He has a lot of time for that organization. He has a lot of time for Steve Stamkos. I'm not saying, I'm just saying there's a possibility. I could see it. I think if Yzerman hadn't been hired in Detroit, I think Yzerman would have been the guy they went after hardcore in Seattle. No offense to Ron Francis. I just think that's what Todd Lewicki would have done.
Yeah.
But I could see them making that pitch and saying, here's a guy we can sell a little bit. And who knows, maybe because of Tampa's cap concerns at that time, maybe they throw a little sweetener in for them to take Steve Stamkos. Now he's got a no move clause, so he has to waive that.
Yeah.
And it's a pretty nice place to be in Tampa Bay.
Yeah, I know, it's hard not to. You see that clip where they showed up at the arena on their jet skis, their Sea-Doos, right?
Yeah, so they did that, and it was great. Hey, we're coming back. And then Tampa was one of those teams that had some COVID outbreak early, and maybe that didn't seem like such a great idea.
Yeah, they shouldn't have shot that commercial then. Okay, I got a few more. Shotgun Jake, will he be here next year?
That is a great question. If I had to put money on it right now, I would say no.
Okay.
But it's a coin flip.
Do you have a favorite sports icon?
Too many to name. Like, honestly, I've got so many that I admire for so many different reasons. If we're talking Canadian, like Terry Fox is up there as far as people that play professional sports. Like Steve Nash is one of my favorite athletes of all time. Christine Sinclair is one of my favorite athletes of all time. If we're talking Canadian and BC connections, but like I've got a laundry list. I'm like a lot of people. It's not just one person.
Favorite sports movie?
I don't know if I have a favorite sports movie, man. I don't know if I can narrow it down just to one. I got lots. Like, which sport are we talking about?
You got top three?
I don't even know if I can narrow that down for you right now. Honestly, like I like a lot of sports movies. When We Were Kings. I'll tell you right. If we had to pick one, maybe it's When We Were Kings. Have you seen that?
It's the football one, right?
No, it's not. It's Muhammad Ali.
Oh,
George Foreman.
Yeah.
Rumble in the Jungle. It's amazing. Is
that the one Will Smith plays Muhammad Ali?
No, so that's the actual Ali. That movie's called Ali, where Will Smith plays it. But there's a documentary called When We Were Kings. Honestly, man, it'll blow your mind. It's fantastic. So they have all this old footage of Muhammad Ali, George Foreman back in the day. They have interviews with people who were there for the fight back in Zaire in the mid-'70s. And Ali was this guy who was the underdog, and that's where he did the rope-a-dope and ended up winning that fight. But just the cultural significance of that fight, the people tuning in from around the planet, the footage they have, honestly, watch that movie. It'll blow your mind.
Okay, last question. Personal highlight or a personal low light? Do you have either?
Whew, in what? My job or in life?
I don't know. Let's stick to the job or life, whatever you want.
Man, personal highlight in the job. Trying to think if there's one that stands out. Man, I've been really lucky. Like, I've honestly been really lucky. The 2010 Olympics, I got to go to so much stuff, and I was at the gold medal game, which was insane and will never happen again in my lifetime the way it went down like it did then. I've covered multiple Super Bowls. Grey Cup is such an underrated event, and I've done that a lot of different times. I got to cover the Stanley Cup final in 2011. I know it sounds like sitting on the fence, but I've been able to do so many great things in this job that every time I try to go through it, I end up forgetting something. And then afterwards I go, oh man, I should have mentioned that. Like, that's what it's been like for me. And like all the great football games I've been to, and you talked about going to Seahawks games. Like I covered Seahawks games for years and would go down there. So I was at those NFC championship games where they came back on the Packers and they had the epic with my Niners that ends up going the way of the Seahawks on the Sherman tip and yelling about Crabtree afterwards.
Yeah.
And I've been to multiple Super Bowls. So, man, I can't narrow it down to just one.
Okay, well, this one, favorite interview.
This one right now.
Hey, good. That's a good answer. That's a good answer. I'm gonna have to clip that for the fucking for the blooper reel.
You got her, man.
Hey, I wanted to thank you for coming on and doing this and giving me your time, and we finally got it done, and everything went great. I feel like I don't have to edit anything out, so it'll be a nice one, and it should be done pretty quick for you.
That's awesome, man. Hey, I'm glad we could do it. I felt bad. I felt like you were thinking I was stringing you along. It's just been a tough juggling act with kids, so I'm happy we were able to make the time, man. And if you need to call me again, hit me up.